Hey team, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. Today, I have got a great guest on here for you guys. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're doing a little bit different take on our normal shtick here today. I've got Lon Stroschein with Normal 40 by way of South Dakota, now down here in Florida. Welcome to the show, Lon. Good to have you here, man.
Oh, Mark, it's super cool to finally be doing this after our paths have been crossing every week for the last 3 or 4 years. It's nice to finally sit down and get this done, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Looking forward to diving in. I'm giving you the same question that we get with everybody. What does it mean for you, Lon, to be intentional?
Well, the way I think about intentionality is probably to start from the opposite. And what is unintentional? And look, when I think of things that are unintentional, I think about things and people who are wandering, about strategies that aren't consistent, about leadership that waffles, about mission that isn't really something you can count on. And it's inconsistency. So what is intentionality? It's to trust with clarity where it is you expect to be led and to lead others, and to just take daily actions to get there. It doesn't mean you'll get it right. It doesn't mean you'll get it wrong. It just means that you know where you want to be, and you trust that the people around you want to get there too. And if you can, it's a simple formula, but a hard one to put together. But if you can do it, you'll become unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Man, there's a lot of clarity in that statement right there. And I really like it. I want to read it back for everybody listening in. Trust with clarity where you expect to be led and lead others. You know, I mean, and really, I mean, and coming from a place, I mean, I love your approach of just taking a look at what doesn't it look like? Because I think we're all pretty clear on what it doesn't look like. A lot of times when we sit down and do clarity coaching with our clients, we'll sit down. Okay, what's the target? What's the thing you want? What's the 90-day target, or whatever the case may be? And initially, what we do, we get a big list of what they don't want. Right? You get a big list. Yeah. And so we start with that. We got to let them get that out, and we say, okay, so if it's not that, then what does it look like?
That's exactly right. And it's easier to start from that standpoint. I think it helps actually provide clarity. If you don't know what it is, let's get really clear on what it is not. Well, all of a sudden, if you get really clear on what it is not, what's left is a narrow path towards what it is. So I think that practice is right on the money, and it's a good way to start.
100%. Well, that was a great way to start the show. Lon, tell us about yourself. Who is Lon Stroschein? What is Normal 40? How'd you get here?
Oh man, it's kind of a long answer, but I'll try to make it quick. So first and foremost, and I still anchor to this every single day of my life, I'm a South Dakota farm kid, 4th generation South Dakota farm kid. And when I'm not here, I take time and go to the farm, and I help with harvest, and I do what my dad would call the glory jobs. I show up when we're moving cattle, and I show up when we're harvesting or planting. And then I'm gone when we're fixing fence and fixing machinery, which is, look, that's just how it works. But that's first and foremost who I am. I was going to be the 4th generation to be on the family farm. My phone rang. I went to college to get a ag business degree. My phone rang my senior year of college, January before my graduation. And it was a United States Senator's office who offered me a position. And I just didn't think that opportunity was going to find me again if I was sequestered into the cab of a 4640 John Deere for the rest of my life. So I decided, I was going to give it a whirl. Fast forward 6 years, I was starting a family. I decided politics wasn't the place I wanted to raise a family. So I got into banking when a couple of bankers from South Dakota took a risk on me. And for no apparent reason other than they liked something about what they saw, they gave me an opportunity to work in their bank. And I had great success there for 6 years. And then the incoming CEO of a company called Raven, which was acquired in 2021 by Case. In 2008, they offered me a position in their company. And by 2009, I was already serving as an executive in that company, where I serve until we were sold in 2021. When we sold in 2021, I had an opportunity to stay with Case. I didn't expect to get an offer. I was the executive in charge of the transaction. I expected to get axed like most sell-side acquisition people do. They gave me a wonderful opportunity to stay, but my work there was done. Something in my gut was burbling in me saying, you don't need to stay here. There's something in you that's different than this, that's just clamoring to get out. You've got to go figure out what it is. And if you stay here, you're not going to find it. At the time, I was 46. After a long conversation with my wife, I realized that she was 100% in my corner. And I decided to resign, and I started Normal 40. And Normal 40 started with a post on LinkedIn. And the post said something like this. This was the day I resigned. My name's Lon Stroschein. I've done a lot of cool things, most recently as a public company executive at Raven. We transacted. I decided my work there was done. I don't have a client. I don't know how I'm going to make money, but I know that this is the chapter in my life to put on me, and we're going to go figure it out. And later that day and through the course of the week, my world changed because people at the height of their game, at the height of their career, started showing up to my inbox, asking me the same question. How'd you know it was your time? How'd you know you had enough? How did you know that you'd be okay if you left? What did your wife say? What did your boss say? All of these questions. And I realized, wait a minute, these aren't, when I look at these people from my seat looking in at them, they look like they've got all put together. They've got everything they set out to get. How is it possible that they were feeling like I was feeling? Well, they were. And I kept leaning into that over the course of the last 3 years. And I've created what I now call Normal 40, which is a community of people like us, you and me, Mark, doing things like this.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is a great story. It's a great run up to where we're going to go today, Lon. And thank you for framing it up so eloquently. It's a cool story. I want to just jump right into it. I want to go into the inbox. How did you know you were ready? What did your wife say?
Oh man, I didn't. Are you kidding me? I tell people, now, if you wait until you're ready, you better be ready to wait. Because I mean, that's just all there is to it. There's this thing, at the time for me, I was 46 and I had a great run. I mean, it was a great run. I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of the work I did. I'm proud of the people I worked with. And I wasn't trying to run away from anything. But at the same time, I would still show up to the office on a lot of days. And I would leave my nice house. I would drive my nice car to my nice office, and I'd walk up and I'd sit down at my nice desk and I'd say, well, is this it? I mean, is this I'm going to be for the rest of my life? And then almost immediately, this rush of kind of embarrassment and shame and guilt would set in, because I would think to myself, well, if this isn't, should I just be happy? Can't I just be happy with all the great things that are going on around me? And so that whole process kind of manifested itself again and again. About every 90 days, I would come in and I'd have the same conversation with myself. And I'd arrive at the same place. Just put your head down and do the good work. And eventually, 90 days later, I'd come back to the same question. So I knew to get to your question, Mark, that there was a greater story trying to work its way out of me. And I knew that for as long as I remained, I'll use distracted, and I don't mean that, I want to be careful how I'm using that word. As long as I remained unfocused or unintentional about who I was going to become, I was going to be unintentionally who I'd already been. And so I really started to create a process around getting clear on what I wanted to do next, how I wanted to live. And I broke it down like this. Nobody knows. I didn't know when I left that 3 years later, I'd be talking to you on a podcast. I'd have a cohort full of wildly impressive people who are going through what I went through. I had no idea. But I knew that if I set out and I got curious about it, I felt like I could build something from my greatest strengths that was pure, organic, and something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And now, granted, I'm only 3 years in, but it's been a pretty good run.
It has been a good run. And I know you're helping a lot of people and helping a lot of people through. What do you think it is that happens for, I mean, the folks you're working with, some wildly successful people, right? Where it's like, if the world would look at them and see their titles and see their roles, see the jobs that they're in, the things that they're doing, maybe the kind of money that they're making. And it's like, how could you want more than that? Right? Or how could you want, I mean, like that was at one point, by the way, that was the goal. that's in many ways, maybe that's how they got there. Right. But what is it? What is it that happens to so many of us when we get to that? It seems like, and I don't know if this has to do with the number 40 being in your business name, but what is it do you think happens? Is it the midlife crisis? Is it God calling us to something, to a greater level of service? What do you think?
I've done a lot of research on this. I've really dedicated the last 3 years of my life to understanding what is this? What is this thing? What is this moment? And it feels like a moment, but it can be a moment, but typically it's only a moment when something really, really unfortunate happens. It becomes a moment when you get, then you've got to react. It becomes a moment when you've been diagnosed with an illness, and then you've got to react to that. It becomes a moment if you go through a divorce. It becomes a moment if you start drinking and something bad happens. It becomes a moment if something happens to your kids or somebody near you dies. Then it becomes a moment. But until then, it's kind of this wandering. It's this wandering. So let me answer your question. The people who go through normal 40, it's not for everyone. There's going to be some people who probably already turned this podcast off. But there's going to be a few, Mark, who are leaning in. They're like, wait a minute, who's this? And I know if that's you, I know exactly. I'm going to describe for you exactly who you are. You are a leader and a doer. You have been your whole life. You're the one people have counted on, and you know it. You've probably dedicated your entire life to this point to one thing. One industry, one company, one boss, one thing. You've dedicated your entire professional life to something. You're the provider in your home. What you do, what you make, how you take care of your family is a necessity. You're the provider. You're a relentless problem solver. At work, you solve problems. You show up, you find a problem, you fix it. You're annoyed when people can't solve problems as fast as you. And when you get home, you solve problems. You don't bring your problems home. You solve your family's problems. That's what you do. You've got a good marriage, but it's not great. There's a lot of room for improvement, and you know it. You don't work on it nearly as hard as you should. You've lived your life right. You've made good decisions. You've done better than you've expected with the options you've had. And you've outperformed your own expectations of only a few years ago. You're relentlessly loyal, probably and occasionally to a fault. You've done what's expected of you, and you're notoriously horrible about asking for help. That's who finds me. And if you're the individual who finds me, there's going to be something else that happens along this journey. You're going to have been the individual who decided when you were 20 what you're going to do with the next 2 decades of your life. You decided at age 20, for example, that you're going to climb the corporate ladder to try to make your way into the C-suite. You decided at age 20 that you're going to go to law school and try to become a partner. You decided at age 20 you wanted to be an accountant, be a public company accountant. You decided at age 20 you wanted to be a doctor. You decided when you were somebody else who it is you want to be. So now fast forward, you've checked all the boxes. You've done all the things that were expected of you. You've showed up, you've solved problems, and you arrive at this place and it's like, well, God dang it, I've got everything I want. What the heck happened to me? Well, you're a different person living with the decisions you decided that were important to you 20 years ago. Not bad decisions, not wrong decisions. The problem is now, Mark, you got something to lose. When you were 24 and you went for a promotion, you had nothing to lose. What did you have to lose? When you were 30 and you went from one company to the other, what did you have to lose? When you're 35 and you went and you changed industry and you took a different position, what you really have to lose? But now if you're in your mid 40s, maybe you're in your mid 50s, and you've got all this sunk cost, all this brand value that's you, all this value you bring to your day to day, and you want to leave that? You want to trade that? You want to get rid of that for what? How are you going to navigate that mentally so that it makes sense to you? And by George, you got to make it make sense, look like it makes sense to everyone else, because image is important to us, right? If we're being honest, image matters. How do you do that? Well, most people don't. They don't. So they do what I did. Every 90 days, they go through this cycle. I think there's something more. These are my best days. I wish I would try X. I see so-and-so doing this. I wish I was doing that, but I'll stay. This is better than it should be. The pay's good. And so that I really truly believe that's what it is. We become someone else at this stage of our life. And it's somebody who's just begging you to take a shot on them, to make a bet on them. And every day you don't is a day that the anxiety, little a anxiety, not clinical anxiety at first, but it's every day that little a anxiety just creeps into who you are. And it creeps into your relationships. And it creeps into your conversations with your boss. And it creeps into your relationship at home. And those things are real, man.
Big time. Big time for real. Wow. That's there are going to be some people right now that are rewinding about 4 minutes and just tapping the screen to go back and re-listen, right? Because you just spoke directly to who they are.
Yeah, well, let me keep talking to him, can I?
Yeah, go for it.
So if that's who you are, if you're that person who wants to rewind, I know exactly what you're feeling. And I know this because I've dedicated, like I said, my last 3 years to knowing exactly what it is you're feeling. Here's the words that people use to me. People who are at the top of their game, the elite performers that you and I look out to. And they're incredible. But here's what they feel. Frustrated to have so much, but feel so little about the mission I'm on. Caged. To have lived life so well, but now unable to risk it, to do something else. I'm locked in. I'm caged. I can't do anything else. I feel controlled. I show up. My calendar's filled up by appointments I didn't put there, with meetings I'm not going to lead, probably don't even need to be a part of, but I'm expected to be there, and I don't have any control. I'm uncertain about if I'm going to be here in 2 to 4 years, and uncertain if I should be. You're somewhat lost in where you're at, but yet on the outside, you've got to make it look like you've got it all put together. You know exactly what's going on. You're stressed on anybody who knows. You're locked in. You're just perpetually annoyed, and it follows you everywhere. Even when you've got a smile on your face, you feel it in your gut. You feel alone, paralyzed. You're getting stale. You've worked your life into a box, and you're stuck. There's a part of you that feels anxiety. There's a part of you that feels like you're settling. You've got incredible content. Most of the times you're absent while you're in other people's presence, and you feel shame and guilt for having so much and feeling so little. These are the people who find the normal 40. And I want everyone to know I named it normal 40 for a major reason. One, because it's normal. What's abnormal is that we talk about it. What's abnormal is that a dude like me will come out and say, hey, look, I know what you're going through, and it sucks, and you can be at the top of your game, and you can have the title in the office, and you're doing the best work of your life and still feel like this. It sucks, but it's normal. And 40, because it happens when, statistically speaking, you've got 40 great years of life in front of you, and you got to figure out what you're going to do with them. You got to figure out what intent you're going to bring to them.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. That's why this show is called the Intentional Agribusiness Leader, right? We want to we keep putting this. We're not even getting in there. I mean, that's who we speak. I'm speaking into that industry because that's where I spend most of my time working, and these are the leaders that I have a heart for. And I see so many people just running on sort of the hamster wheel of life with no zest, no zeal, right? With a lack of clarity towards who it is that they want to become, and whether it's in that business or not in that business. And quite frankly, like a little bit of a risk to bring this conversation out here because our business is focused on helping leaders build great organizations and remove friction from their people processes and create cultures within which they can keep their people. And that's an important aspect of what we do from a business perspective. But I thought about this before I sent the invite to you to come on the show. And I said, no, like we need to have this conversation because there are some people who are operating out of integrity with who they came here in this lifetime to be. And they're leading teams and they're leading organizations from a place of actually a lack of intentionality because they haven't given themselves permission, or maybe somebody else like you hasn't given them permission to question, right? Is this the place? Or maybe it is the place, but is this how? Or is this who I need to be in this space? Right. And they're so, like, you know, as you're describing, like they're showing up to a day full of appointments that they didn't put on their calendar with things that they probably don't want to do. And so then there's just no time to sit down and actually intentionally think through, okay, well, who am I? What am I showing up here for? What do I stand for? What will I tolerate? What will I not tolerate? We teach something called the attractor factor. What is my attractor factor? Can I give myself permission to live out life as that person? And what would it mean if I did? That's why I was like, we need to have this conversation on the show. Because if we don't get this type of messaging in front of people, then we run the risk of having people not have this conversation with themselves, right? And if you're the leader of that team, if you're the CEO or you're the VP of that team or the regional manager or whatever, like you are the bottleneck for the people below you. The example you set has more influence over those people, their lives, their fulfillment, their satisfaction than you give yourself credit for. And you need to know that.
I totally agree. You know, there's a lot of cool things I get to do, not the least of which is talk to people like you and incredible leaders. I talk to a lot of CEOs, and a lot of them are clients, sure, but the best CEOs are the ones who want to know, what is their leadership team going through? What do they need to know about their leadership team? And I've had wonderful conversations. One of the things you learn when you interview people like I do for a living, who are right here, right where we're talking, you really learn what it is they want. We just talked about two things. We talked about who the people are who go through this, and what do they feel. Well, let me talk for a moment about what they want. The people who are listening, the ones who've been rewinding, this is for them, but it's also for their bosses. It's for the people who are listening who have employees who might be looking, who, you know, I'm talking to you, the people who hear my voice, and if it's resonating, that's great. But guess what? It's happening for the people who work for you, and it's happening for the people you work for. I promise you. You'll think it's yourself, but it's probably deeper than that. So what do they want? And so for the CEOs, listen to this. Your employees want to be themselves. Now, that doesn't mean they want to go off and, you know, waste time and spend corporate resources. And if that's the type of employees you've got a different problem. If you've got the right employees, they want the freedom to solve problems the way they want them to be solved. Now, that sounds so easy. And look, I used to be a corporate executive. I know how ridiculously easy that sounds. But if you just put a little effort into that, as the CEO, helping find a way for people to solve problems according to their skills, not according to your flow chart or your process improvement plan, you're going to have a radically more engaged employee. They want some control. They want the ability to say no and not fear consequence. They want to be able to offer their opinion and know that it's valued. And if you can really create that and not hold it against them later, you'll have a radically improved culture. They want time with kids and time with spouse. Yeah. And guess what? You can make them take vacation. You can, because a lot of people don't want to. In fact, it's bragging rights for a lot of the people to not take vacation. I was that way. I used to. Yeah. I always had hangover vacation. You know, it's not anything I'm proud of now. Who paid the price for that? My wife and kids. That's it. Yep. And you know, my boss wouldn't have made me feel guilty about being gone, but I didn't do it. So that's something they can do. And to give them clarity on mission and how their role is connected to the strategy of the company. If you can do that, if you can just connect them to performance, to results, not accountable to them, you've got plenty of that. Trust me. I've been in enough companies know that.
Yeah.
If you can just show them how you're counting on them to help the customer and what they can do, you can provide that clarity. They'll go through walls for you and for the customer. But here's the challenge. Here's the challenge for a CEO and for executive management. You're a long ways removed from your customer. The people you want to retain on your team know your customer. They know better than you, and they care about them more than they care about you. It's going to be hard to hear, but the things that annoy you about your employees, about how they're always taking the side of their farmer customer or the grower or the retailer, that's them giving a damn about their customer. And you really need to tune into that. And it's great that you show up when your customer's in town and you let them come to the C-suite. And it's great that maybe you go once a year to visit them. That's great. Keep doing that. But the best resource you have to really know your customer is know the people who know them best. And by the way, you're employing them. So pay attention, listen to them, and get to hear them when they're telling you what their customer's frustration is. And I'll say just one more thing, and then I'll be done with my ramble here, Mark. But the incentive of leaders who are directly facing the customer, their incentive is to take care of that customer. It's not financial. I know that the C-suite's going to think that it's financial. It's not. It's to take care of the customer. They want that friendship more than they want the $300 they're going to make for selling a product. I promise you. They're going to take care of the customer. That is their priority. Your priority in the C-suite, if you're not careful, is the shareholder, is the bottom line. And there's a disconnect there. There's a disconnect, an unhealthy disconnect that creates all of this. We talk about culture. Well, their culture's a million things, but the one thing that's consistent across all of it is, do you agree with who the customer is really? And if you can agree on that, C-suite to the front line. Who's the customer really? Is it the shareholder? Is it the bottom line? And sometimes it needs to be. If you're losing money, guess what? It needs to be. Plus, if you're a good, strong company and you don't agree that the person that you should care most about is your customer and that you should do whatever it takes to make it work. And by the way, when you do that, your customer will show up for you too. They'll meet you halfway. You'll have a culture that'll be unbeatable.
Yeah, beautiful. Incredibly well put and justified, and coming from a place of having been there. I love what you said about, your customer or your employee. That's much closer to the customer. It spends more time with your customer than they spend with you, loves your customer more than they love you, deeper respect, right? But really, how can you empower the organization for those people to be able to do what they intuitively know what they need to do, and in a way that feels really good for them? And can you create that culture? One of our sayings, one of the things we say out at our Thriving Leader program all the time is, as thriving leaders, if you're to be defined as a thriving leader, we believe that you have a moral obligation to create organizations within which people can thrive. And every decision you make, every policy you implement, everything that you invest in or don't invest in is either driving you toward that or it's not. It's either creating that or it's not.
That's right.
And so that's where I wanted to have this conversation, to bring it back full circle. I wanted to have this conversation because that means that you as a leader need to also be dialed in. You need to know what type of environment within which do you thrive. Right. And are there some things right now that maybe need to shift, that need to change a little bit, regardless of what your title is and how high up inside the organization you are? Are there some things that need to shift and change? Because if if some of the things that Lon said earlier are true about you, then you're going to start to see those cracks show up in your team.
True.
It happens. And people will, suddenly become agitated and come up with an excuse about why this culture, this organization doesn't work for me anymore. Not truly even really knowing why, right? But those things, like we always say, leadership is reflection. So your environment always reflects back to you those things that you need to go to work on.
Yeah, right on.
So super, super, super important. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to hop on one thing. I think it's really important. I went off on, executives who just need to know what they've got, which is incredible leaders. And the leaders who know the customer are going to be the ones that annoy you. They are. That's normal. Mm-hmm. And you just got to take that for what it is. They won't annoy you because you don't like them. They'll annoy you because they're putting you in a position to make a hard choice. They are clear that they should take care of the customer. And if you don't want to help them do that, that's where the rift starts. So we talked about that. And I think I wanted the C-suite to know that is real. But it goes the other way too. I want the people on the front lines who are out talking to the customer that the C-suite, people in upper management, also have a hard job. They're not just calling it in. They're not just punching the clock. Just because you see them doing different things than you does not mean that their work is not important. It's not intentional. It's not that they're not looking out for you, even though you use different words and you prioritize things slightly different. It does not mean that they don't have your back. It doesn't mean any of that. What it just means is that you use different language, and that maybe, just maybe, your culture isn't ready, able, or capable of having these conversations whereby you can just say, well, you said it like this, but do you really mean this? Because now I can see that. And if you can have that conversation, you're going to create this respect up and down where you have different skills, you have different jobs, you have different roles, and those are always going to be there. That I think really helps a culture coalesce and strengthen. Then when you go out and the C-suite goes and talks to customers and said, yeah, hey, Steve told me what you said about X, Y, and Z, Steve being the frontline guy, and how can we fix that? And you can come in there, say, and express that you heard him, that it was an uncomfortable conversation for you to hear, but because it came from Steve and because Steve heard it from you, we really want to fix this. Totally different relationship dynamic built, and it creates this fun, intentional culture that really becomes hard to stop.
Incredibly well put. And this is why the podcast is called Intentional Ag Leader. It's like, this is what intention looks like. It actually means doing some of these things, being intentional for yourself, finding ways to be intentional for your team, and a lot of people are well-intended, but poorly executed.
Yes.
Right. We're trying to elevate people to that next level. All right. This is what intention means. It's like, man, I really, I would really like to take my wife out on a date night this week, but man, we just got so much going on. Okay. Well, and nobody says anything. Like, that's a perfectly valid excuse in today's world. Like, yes, we got a lot going on. We got this going on with the kids. We got this going on with work. We got da-da-da-da. Well, we have a standard in our house of weekly date nights. And so guess what? Like, you and I are going to hop off this thing in the next 15, 20 minutes. And, I'm packing it up. It's date night. And is that massively convenient? No, it's intentional. Because she needs to know that I'm making her and this and us a priority. Because that's the one thing, if that relationship goes south, who gives a damn about my business? Who would care about a guy teaching a thriving leader program if he's not thriving? Right. And not that I'm hitting on all 8 cylinders every single day of the week, Lon. Right. But, we sure do give it the good old college try. And that's really what this means. That's what it means to be intentional. And so you're talking a lot about creating those intentional environments. I love it. I want to get to something. This has actually been on my mind since we started the conversation. let's just say, but have you ever read any John Eldridge books?
Yeah.
He Wild at Heart was one of his books.
Bring up. Yeah.
Okay, good. So Wild at Heart is a big one. And then Fathered by God was a follow-up to that. That's a little bit more, adult focus, kind of it focuses on the journey of a man's soul. So for those listening, I'll paraphrase just a little bit, right? So Fathered by God really shifted my relationship with the Lord. It really kind of brought me into the space that I'm in now in many ways, along with lots of other things. But it gave me a framework, right? And so the framework is as a man goes through life, as we go through life, and I think women experience this probably differently, but also similarly. So we have our boyhood age, from like say 0 to 7, right? And that's like the boyhood time, and then we have our say 7 or 8 up to early teenage years, 14, or so, and that's kind of our warrior training, phase where we're learning. We want to be like our dads. We want to learn how to do more adventurous things. We're kind of igniting that spark of adventure. And then we get into our cowboy phase, which lasts from our late teens up into our 20s, which is very much like you're just, nobody can tell you how to do anything. So you're just going to go out there, figure it out. You tend to make a lot of mistakes. You go out and you try, and you get bucked off the horse. You get right back on. It's that time in life for just trying and failing and trying and failing. Cause like you said early on in the conversation, there really is no consequence to trying for the promotion. Why not go for it? Right. And we all have to go through that cowboy phase. And then once we get through that, and then maybe we get married and we have a couple of kids, we start to enter more of the warrior phase, right? And the warrior phase happens late 20s up through our 30s. And say up to like say late 30s, or maybe even to the early 40s, depending on who you are. And that's the grind, the build, sacrifice everything and you're out on the field with your sword in hand, just going after it every single day. Right. And I think what happens for a lot of us is we get to the 40s, and we start to advance from the warrior to the king phase. This is where you mentioned, like, we start to look at the next 40 years. And this is the king phase. You've got enough wisdom. You've taken enough licks. You've built enough, in your life where you're now looking at, okay, now what do I do with all this? Is this all there is? Right. And then we start to think about legacy a little bit, whatever that may be for individuals. So we go, those are all these different phases. And so what I'm thinking about, Lon, is as we're speaking to those warriors, the 35-year-old warrior who hasn't got to maybe they're not quite there yet. Maybe they're not exactly that person you described. Right. But if you could go back and talk to 35-year-old warrior Lon, who's out there, just got his sword out of the sheath every day, running down the battlefield of life. Is there anything you could tell him that would help him set himself up better for this stage? Or is it just sort of a run into thing? It's just got to happen. What do you think?
There's some advice I would give to my 35-year-old self. One, and this is painfully obvious, it's going to be almost useless for people to hear, but for those who need to hear it, I'm going to say it again. Whatever you are able to save in your 30s, and as soon as you can do it, save it. Whatever delayed gratification you can endure, as early as you can, do it. Because the time value of money is not a theory, it's real. It really does happen. So the sooner you can, do the hard thing of saving more than you want to save. And usually you can do that just by buying one less stupid thing each week, or really that's it. Buy one less stupid thing each week, and you're going to really drive up what you save. So there's that. And that's in 1,000 books from 1,000 people said 1,000 different ways, but just save well. Save well as early as you can, because it's going to give you way more horsepower than you thought possible when you really need it. So that's number one. And number two, what I wasn't familiar with this framework that you just mentioned, but in my framework, it's the endowment phase. It's when you're building. It's when you're growing your endowment, all the things you've experienced, all the things you've done. In that phase, What I wish I'd have done earlier, Mark, is I wish I would have been building something for myself on the side. Not when I was 35 to have the revenue. Not because I wanted to make a little more or put more hours in. What doing something on the side when you're 30 or 35 or 40 or 45 does for you is it gives you options. It's got this odd way of giving you this courage that if you don't have a plan B, if all you've got is the W-2 that you're counting on Friday, if that's all you've got and that's all you've given your life to, by the time you're 40, 45, 50, you really are at a disadvantage to those who have been building a craft, even if they're not making money. If they've got a skill they've been working on the side, if they've got a client that they've been helping on the side, they've got anything, they've got such a head start because now they've got the proof. They've got this simple proof that I'm capable of more. I'm capable of more than what I'm getting compensated to do daily, and people will pay me to do it. So it's not a function of how much can you make on the side. It's a function of, can I prove to myself it's possible? And if I'd have started that earlier, I didn't start it until after I left. And if I had that confidence, capability, everybody wants confidence. Everybody who talk about this, who shows up, everybody wants to leave with confidence. They want to start something once they've got confidence that it's going to be successful. And I tell everybody, that's bullshit. You're not going to leave with confidence. You're going to leave with courage. That's it. You'll build confidence if you're courageous enough, but you're not going to leave with confidence. You're going to have to lean into your courage. So what having something on the side does is it solves the courage equation. You got it. You've already doing it. Now you're building confidence, which is the thing you really want. And if you've got that, you're going to be such a bigger force. And I'll say one more thing. I think people who have a plan B are better at their plan A. I think people who have the confidence in knowing that they can say what needs to be said and they'll be all right. Confidence in believing that they can take a position that's not popular and they'll be all right. I think they enjoy their plan A better if they've got a plan B.
I agree, man. I agree. As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about Pat Bet David, he's got the Valuetainment is his brand. I don't know if you follow these guys on YouTube at all or on online. They've built this entire online media empire, very influential. And not that anybody has to build anything this big. That's not the point. But so 2 years ago, I think it was 2022, he had an exit from his business. He built up some insurance company. Okay, sold it for $200 million. But he had been building Valuetainment and making YouTube videos for the last decade. Right. And it just started from a place of, this is something I'm interested in. I want to go down this path. And that he started that in like 2013, and now 11 years later, he's got, all of the politicians are coming on his show during the election cycle. Right. And I watched that. It's not like I'm not out to create that necessarily. But it's just interesting, right? To say like, this was a side hustle. This was just something he did when he had extra time, on the side from running an insurance business. I mean, he was running just a very boring life insurance company. Like that was, he played that game, right? Right up until he turned, 42 or something like that, or 44. And then he had his exit and there he goes. And that's like, but that gave him practice and certainty from doing something else. And so I think you're right. Like it makes you better as you're developing yourself in other ways. So, man, this has been a ramble. This has been, 45 minutes now of just like pure. Go back and listen again, you guys. Lon, last thoughts before we bring this thing in for landing. So, know we're out of time.
Last thoughts from me.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? Yes.
Oh man, I'm so bummed we didn't get it. We got a lot we need to talk about yet. We got to talk about farmers. We got to talk about retailers. We got to talk about all the people
You got time to go further?
I've got about 10 minutes, so not a lot of time actually.
All right. Well, let's go a little bit further. Where would you like to go with that? What comes up for you when you think about what's going on in that space? And I mean, there's so much we could talk. We've talked so much about the big end of intentional leadership, how we think about ourselves, where we're going. But in respect to time, let's riff on that for a minute.
Yeah, man. One of the things I have a clue where this is going to go. I don't have a loaded question. So let's just. But one of the things I do is, I mentioned this off the top, during harvest time, I go home and I harvest. I sit in the tractors by myself, and I'm on the radio, and I'm not important enough to run the combine. I'm the grain cart jockey, but god dang it, I'd have it no other way. And there's something so beautiful and romantic for me, that I get to do that. And it's just this incredible gift. And I want people in agriculture to know that I've gotten to do a lot of things, and that I know that staring at corn stalks and soybean rows running into your face for 15 hours a day can be pretty grueling, and it gets pretty old. And making fence through swamps is kind of it's a miserable job that nobody likes to do. And running to town, spending tens of thousands of dollars for repairs is a really expensive way to go through life. But you've got a pretty rich opportunity, a pretty rich way to live. And, I remember when I was young, here's the epitome of a ramble. When I was young and I was still planning on going home to the farm, my dad and I were out making fence, and we were not big farmers. And our farm got chopped in half in the 80s, like a lot of farms. And this was probably 1990. So we were still in recovery mode. And my dad was assuming that I was going to take over the farm, and so was I, for that matter. And he was asking, we were just having a conversation while Twins baseball was on the AM radio in the background with the doors of the Ford F-250, 1981, a 10-year-old Ford truck with the crackle in the radio going on. We were making fence. I remember it so vividly. And he said, are you still planning to come home and take over the farm? And I was kind of quiet. He kind of kept probing, and he's like, well, this is for you. This is here for you if you want it. And that's why I'm still here, he said. So I said, Dad, I want to, but it's just not a very good life. And my dad stopped me almost in the moment I said it. He's like, no, you've got it wrong. It's the best life. It's just really hard to make a living at it. But don't get those two confused. Don't get those two things confused. And it was so accurate. And so I guess, look, maybe I just want to tell farmers thanks and tell people in agriculture thanks. And, maybe invite dudes like me who've been there back into it. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
My neighbors love it when I come back and I help them harvest, because it's a different energy. And if you invite people back into it, if you get a chance, you might get to see them light up the way I do when I get to experience the technology, be part of big machinery. The stuff you take for granted is mind-blowing to people when you do them. And if there's not you to welcome them into your operation, you should do it, because it's really good for your mental health, your spiritual health, and it's really good for your relationship health with people in industry.
Yeah, very cool. I think that would be one of the most intentional things that you can do. I'll put my hand up if you guys want me to come out and hang. A lot of people don't know it. I didn't grow up in traditional ag. Like my dad was a fur trader and trapper. We raised fox, like a cow-calf herd on our farm. until the 80s. The fur market went under, and then we got into the fishing bait business. And so I spent my summer literally farming, trapping leeches. That's what I grew up doing, 12, 15 hours a day until the end of July. From whenever the ice melted in Minnesota through July, that was the business. But it was because of FFA, agriculture education. That program, that model works, brings people like me, gives people like me an opportunity to come and get to know people like you who did grow up in that situation and get into the industry. That works. And also, I just see so many people, who are out there. Maybe it's that CEO or that VP running, whether it's an ag retail outfit or a manufacturing level company, who just don't get that much opportunity. Reach out to the vendor, the manufacturers who you buy from. Invite these people out too. I think it would be one of the most intentional things that you guys can do. But there's in the FFA Creed, it talks about that inborn fondness that even in hours of discouragement, I cannot deny. Right. And there's just something I can remember where I was 6 years old, standing at the edge of the little hay field that we had on our little hobby farm. And one of the local farmers would come in to cut that, like 2.5 acres, right? But it was a little bit of hay, a little bit extra hay for his operation. Dad would let him come cut it. And I would just stand there and watch, and it was like that June evening when it's first cutting and the dew is setting, kind of just starting to set in. It's cool on your arms. The air is cool. The sun's about to set, and he's just out there running that swath through the field. And I was sold. Like I've been hooked on ag ever since.
Love that.
And that's all it took, bringing people back in. Man, this has been a fun conversation. Thank you.
Of course, man. Thanks for the ramble. Thanks for inviting me on. Thanks for doing what you do, dude. I'm a fan.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks for what you're doing. Keep it up. And we'll have you on again. We need to do this again down the road.
Anytime, man.